Hey everybody, welcome to Metafan. I'm your host Aaron.
And I'm Elrod.
And today we're going to talk about models because I have a big passion for modeling and so does he.
Yep.
And so we were just going to talk a little bit about model building. There's also another video that we did where I actually, I think it's around here someplace. I don't know.
It's somewhere on the ship.
Oh, there it is. Bye-bye. I have this guy also. So we actually have a video where we show you how to paint this dude up from this. So if you want to see some how-to, you can go check that one out, and we'll put a link to that. You can also subscribe to the channel, obviously, if you want to see that. But today, we're just going to talk about models generally, because the show's Metafan, and it's about fandom, and I'm a big fan of modeling. Specifically, these are all models that I've actually built, and I'm a big fan of models of classic monsters.
Yeah, and a lot of the models I do some monster models and stuff like that too. I'm more into car models and things like that because I also build hot rods and choppers and stuff like that. So the models I do really don't pertain to this as much, but I still love models, and we enjoy sitting down together and working on some models together.
Yeah, it's funny because like you have a longer history of building models. Like most people who build models, it seems like it stretches back into their childhood. And it doesn't really for me. I built a few car models as a kid, but it wasn't like a big part of my reality. You built some car models starting out as a young kid, though.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fact, we were talking about it earlier. I just found my first model that was actually bought for me before I was born. So, it's ancient. But,
it's like Yoda old.
Yeah. So that's a model that it's missing some pieces, and it's got moved around a lot in the last almost 40 years, and so that's a model that I'm going to take apart and try to restore and bring to its, I would say former glory, but like I painted it when I was 5, so it had no glory.
And that's the thing. So like, there's all this history of people who like if you're of a certain age. And, we're old enough that we were alive before Walmart was in every single corner of the earth. And so there were always these, like, little 5 and dimes somewhere. Walmart had it, too. But, like, there were always these little sort of 5 and dime stores or whatever, and you go into them, and somewhere near the toys, there was an aisle or half an aisle at least that was full of models.
Sure. I remember in the town that I grew up in fact, I was just visiting the other day, and I actually went by to see if the model shop, because we actually had a hobby shop, a little model shop, and I went by to see if it was still there, and it was, and the same guy still behind the counter, still the same guy I remember. He just kind of, hey, how you doing?
But see, that's the issue. So, like, where I grew up, there was no model shop. And that's the thing that I was going to say is that I found modeling really frustrating because I would see these pictures. I'd buy a model, and I'd go home to make it, and it would never look anything like the box. It would look like crap, basically.
Well, unfair advantage with the pictures on the box, because obviously they would take photos of the model and then airbrush it in. And I did the same thing when I was a kid. I'd be like, oh, it doesn't look like that. Well, as I grew older and figured out the tricks of the trade, I figured out their model didn't look like that either.
Yeah, but as a kid, I just never could. I always was frustrated by the whole thing. So I built a couple of things. They look garbagey to me. I saw this kind of stuff. In fact, you were talking about restoration. This guy over here is actually a restoration of a 60s kit from Aurora Models that I bought. And you find a lot of these guys that were clearly painted up by kids using enamel paint. And that's the other thing. You'd go into like the 5 and dime or the Walmart or whatever, and there would be
the
like
tiny little testers,
those little tester
square jars,
and you had like 7 colors to choose from if you got the extreme mega pack. And so like anytime if you had seen this one whenever I got him, it was like one coat of green, and then like black on the jacket and pants, and then I forget what everything else was, but it was like 3 or 4 colors, and it didn't look realistic, and it looked shiny gloss metallic enamels.
Well, you talk about that, and actually, I got really jealous when he got this one. So I tracked down an original kit as well.
This,
And,
by the way, Aurora Models put these out. We can talk about that
yeah,
later.
1964. So anyway, like I said, I got really jealous of him, and I had to have one too because we're both Frankenstein nuts. And so I tracked one down, and we've started cleaning it up a little bit. But maybe in the future, it's something that we can show the folks out in TV land.
Yeah, absolutely. We could definitely do another video where we do a restoration project. But so for me, the thing was, I don't know how long ago it was now, but so I had a long break with modeling. There was modeling around, and these models were actually in the back of monster magazines. Now, for me, the big draw was the monsters themselves. The excitement was building the monster kit, and so I thought that was really cool. But I never really bought any of them because by the time, so this model, like he said, was 1964. That's a little bit before my time, like a lot before my time.
But they were still making that kit when we were kids. They just did it in neon colors, so you put it under a black light, and they called them illuminators.
Well, and that's the thing. Like where I grew up, they didn't have any of that. I mean, it was car models or nothing. And I could have ordered it out of the back of the magazine, but also in those days, it took 2 months to get something in the mail,
Yeah.
and I just didn't feel like it. So the point is, I just put it aside for a long time and didn't really care that much about it. And then I've always loved the monsters, though. I've always loved monster movies. I've always loved horror movies. And I saw Frankenstein the first time when I was 5, so that kind of kicked off that love. So I've had this big fascination with that character and with that era of movies ever since. And then a few years ago, I don't know if you remember what it was, but something got me interested. I know what it was. I saw a movie about steampunk. And I had some friends that were into steampunk. It was 8 years ago or so. I had some friends that were into steampunk, and I saw some people that were modding Nerf guns, right? Like those guns that people play, HVZ and all those games with, Humans versus Zombies and such. And I modded one. I painted it up to look like a steampunk weapon, and that was really fun. And I used those same stupid square bottles of Tester's paint, but I learned some technique. I learned how to dry brush. I learned how to weather. And then all of a sudden after I did it, I was like, wow, this isn't that hard. And the guns that I built looked pretty cool, so I built a couple for my friends and their kids. And then I decided to take a swing. I have a friend who's a big Creatures from the Black Lagoon fan, and she had the original Aurora model kit from that. And I bought they call them repops. I bought a reproduction model of that kit made by Revell, and I painted it. And I figured that it would be a big disaster and I'd never give it to her, and it turned out really cool. And then I painted a Frankenstein kit from Mobius. I don't think any of the models I have here are early ones. Actually, the Dracula kit right here is pretty early. That's the Broadway Dracula. They couldn't get the rights Universal wouldn't grant the rights for some reason to use Bela Lugosi's actual image. So they were like, if nobody knows, Bela Lugosi was the guy that played Dracula originally in the 1931 film. But for years before that, he had this really super successful run playing Dracula on Broadway, right? So they just were like, fine, we'll just use the Dracula image from Broadway, which, by the way, Universal used everything that he had brought to the Broadway show.
Right.
So the cape, the ring, the hairstyle, the tuxedo, everything was already there in the character. So this kit is really cool. It's actually one of the kits I'm most proud of. It's also got some dust in the back because it's been sitting on my mantle for a while. It's in the middle of my mantle, though. I love it. The thing about model building that's really cool to me is what you learn about the world around you. And that sounds really strange, but it's true. Like, I work in video, and I have to think a lot about how light works. But I have had to think more about how light works in building these models than I have in my career. This kit particularly, and we'll get in here on it, but this kit around the face, if you look really close and the light's right, on the one side of the face where the torch is, it looks like human color, right? I painted it with a reddish color and then like kind of a white. So it looks like a pale guy on one side. But this side, the side that faces the darkness, you can see, because he's a creature of darkness, you can see the true being that he is, and it's actually this sort of dead blue color.
It's a really cool effect that you really don't notice until he points it out to you. You just go, wow, the detail's amazing in that. And then when he pointed it out to me, I was like, oh, that's what it is. That's what makes the head look so good and so realistic in this one.
Yeah, and I mean, it was, then thanks. It was a lot of fun to just, I mean, I just was sitting there, I remember for days, because this one took me 4.5, 5 months to build, somewhere in that neighborhood, working 3 nights a week probably on it. A lot of that seam work, a lot of that is when you glue the pieces together, if you're not a modeler, when you glue the pieces together where they meet, there's these seams, and you don't want those, so you have to find a way to kind of build those seams up, and so you put a putty or some kind of material in there, and then you sand and sand and sand until you get that seam right, and you got to get the textures back and everything.
Yeah, like you can really see the seams in this one. No, I'm just joking. He's really, really good at seam work, so I like to give him a hard time sometimes.
I tell you though, sitting here looking at him, I'm just like, there's a seam and there's a problem. All the things you could have done better. Because I tell you, it is funny. Like I remember I painted that first Mobius Frankenstein kit, and I got done with it, and I was just so impressed with how it turned out. I was like, this looks really cool. And I mean, I still think it looks pretty cool. We've got some video of it, and maybe we'll drop it in right here. But it doesn't look very good to me now. You know, like it's not good. But you learn things with every one. And then you start to do things where you start to modify them, and you start to bring in new techniques. Like, for example, I've got a giant Frankenstein that was made by, it's a repop 2 by my Mobius of a original Aurora kit.
When he says giant Frankenstein, it's like this tall.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's really, really cool kit.
And again, iconic, super iconic. And with that one, I installed some lights in his eyes. And from there, I decided to do a light in the eyes. I don't know why I didn't, before we shot this, put a battery in this, because I actually put a switch on the back of this Mars Attacks kit and put a light up through it. And I don't keep a battery in it because I did something wrong. There's a short somewhere, so the battery drains. But this light actually lights up. That's not an original feature of the kit, right? So a lot of people do modifications above and beyond that.
Well, saying that, looking at this kit, these weren't originally filled with liquids.
No, they make a pretend liquid, and I bought some of it, and I poured it in there, and I mixed it with a lot of different colors, and I experimented with some different techniques.
Which really makes this kit pop. I mean, I mean, everything about it is really fantastic and looks great. But when you notice the detail of the liquid in the bottles, and they have different levels of liquid in them, I mean, the detail in this kit is just amazing.
I'll tell you what, though, that kit was one of the most frustrating builds I've ever had. What I've learned for me personally is that I have an aptitude for painting monsters, and the monsterier the monster, the better. And there's the bride, played by Elsa Lanchester, was really, really hard. Because she's almost human, right? And I found it really difficult to do human features.
I think you still struggle with that a little bit, because I think you do great at it. But the creature kit that you did, holding the girl, which would have been Julie Adams, but the creature you said you enjoyed doing, but the girl you absolutely hated.
Well, I love to paint the creature. I think that the creature is one of my favorite things to paint, but I've developed a technique for the creature that works for me. So like when I first started, and if you go watch the other video that we did where I show you a little bit of technique, it's all a dry brush technique. And so that model, this model were all painted before I started to use washes. And it was, so the difference is dry brush is a technique where you kind of go back over, and you can see it on this. You paint it one color, and then you go back over with a very light brushing of another color on top of it, and that gives it this really kind of amazing texture. And like I said, this whole thing is done with nothing but dry brush.
Start with your darker colors and work lighter.
And then work to light, that's right. And then washes, for those of you who are not modelers, washes are whenever you take a really thin color and you work it in, and it's usually a darker color that helps penetrate. Sometimes if your colors get too bright, you can use a wash to subdue them down, kind of knock the differentiation down and kind of bring things together a little bit. And I hadn't started using those until one of these pieces. There's a lot of washes in that piece. In fact, I really used a lot in that one. And it was actually this one where I first started to use airbrushes. I was terrified of airbrushes for some reason. It just seemed like I would never get it right. And truthfully, there's still problems. Airbrushes clog really easily, and they can be frustrating for that reason. But I just decided to start trying to play with them on this kit, because all it had to be was black, right?
So you don't have to be a professional to do this. Go out, get a model. If you're not already doing it, go out and get a model. Just have some fun with it. Learn the techniques. There's a lot of good videos out there, including the one that A-aron did for this guy, that can show you some easy techniques and have fun with it. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and if you're interested in this stuff and you'd like to get started, if you haven't already tried this out, we'll drop some links to the things that we found are successful. We can drop some links to some modeling resources, as well as if you like monster models in particular, there's a few different things that I like. And we'll drop some links to those down there as well. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way we're for sure going to do more modeling videos. And keep the conversation going. Show us some pictures of things that you've done on social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'll undoubtedly do more videos about modeling because it's something that we both enjoy.
Yeah, and, share some pictures of your models with us if you're modeling. Share some of your techniques because you can never stop learning when it comes to this stuff. And there's some, we both follow some great modelers out there that are mind-blowing. I mean, everybody has different techniques and you never start learning. You never stop learning.
Yeah, it'd be nice if people use the comment section for something other than horror. So, and I don't mean the genre horror, but I mean being horrible people. So feel free to comment below. Feel free to check us out on social media, subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. And I just said exact same thing you did. See you next time.
See you next time.
Repeat.